The galaxy had changed. Hundreds of years had passed since humans had disappeared. Their ships, once familiar in every star system, were now just legends told in alien classrooms and recorded in history archives. Many believed humans had vanished forever, taken by a war that had left the stars silent and lonely. The absence of humanity had shaped entire civilizations. Wars had ended, borders were drawn, and alien species thrived in peace, or what they thought was peace. On the planet Valor, a world of silver cities and floating towers, a young alien scholar named Lyra worked in a quiet observation tower at the edge of the capital. Lyra had pale blue skin, long silver hair, and eyes that reflected the stars. She had spent her life studying ancient human records, fascinated by the tales of their courage, curiosity, and strange ways of thinking. Her people had always seen humans as unpredictable, dangerous, yet brilliant. But now, in a galaxy that had forgotten fear, humans were nothing more than stories. Lyra was alone in the observation tower when the signal first appeared. At first, she thought it was a glitch. The sensors, which monitored interstellar traffic, had never recorded such a formation. A fleet of ships was approaching from the far reaches of the galaxy, moving with precise coordination. The ships were unlike anything Lyra had seen. Their design was elegant yet functional, with shimmering hulls that reflected light like liquid metal. "Impossible," she whispered, stepping closer to the control panel. "Humans, they can't exist anymore." But the fleet kept coming. Sensors confirmed it. These were human vessels, and they were enormous in number. They did not attack, did not send messages, did not announce their intentions. They simply arrived, moving as though they owned the stars. Lyra's heart raced. She quickly contacted the Galactic Council, the governing body of Valor. The Council's communication chamber was a grand hall of crystal panels and holographic maps. The alien leaders were already in session when she appeared, their voices tense with curiosity and anxiety. "Lyra," said the Council's chair, a tall being named Draven with dark green scales and deep amber eyes, "explain immediately. What is this fleet?" They are humans," Lyra said, her voice trembling. "I have verified their signatures. They are returning." The room fell silent. For a moment, even the Council's most confident members were speechless. The humans had vanished from the galaxy centuries ago. No one had expected them to come back. "What do they want?" asked another Council member, a small, glowing being named Finn. "Surely they cannot return simply to visit." Lyra shook her head. "I do not know. But their approach, it is not aggressive. They are observing, scanning, and moving with careful control. They are calm, but deliberate." The Council debated endlessly. Some wanted to prepare weapons. Others argued that humans had been gone so long they could not pose a threat. But the truth was, no one truly understood humans anymore. Their disappearance had created a void of uncertainty that now returned with these ships. Meanwhile, on the observation tower, Lyra watched the humans land on Valor's outer plains. One ship descended first, its engines glowing softly in the dusk. The rest of the fleet hovered behind it, forming a silent wall of metal and light. The first human ambassador stepped out. He was tall, wearing a simple uniform that shimmered faintly under Valor's sun. His eyes were dark, yet they carried a quiet intensity. Lyra felt a strange sensation as she looked at him, a mix of awe, curiosity, and fear. He did not speak immediately. He simply surveyed the land, taking in the city, the council chambers, and the beings gathered to watch him. Every movement was precise, deliberate, and calm. "What is he doing?" Lyra whispered. "It is called observation," Draven said, though his voice carried uncertainty. "Humans always watched before they acted." The ambassador finally spoke, his voice clear and calm, carrying across the plains. "I am here to assess," he said. "Not to conquer, not to negotiate, to judge." A ripple of shock passed through the assembled aliens. To judge? What right did humans have to judge the galaxy? Weren't they gone? Why now? Lyra could not take her eyes off him. There was something in his tone that made her heart beat faster, not from fear alone, but from the sense of truth in his words. Humans were not here to attack. They were here to see what had become of the galaxy in their absence, and to decide what should change. The council tried to respond. Draven stepped forward, his voice firm though shaky. "We welcome you, humans, but surely there must be reason. Reason for this sudden return?" The human ambassador tilted his head slightly. "Reason is simple. The galaxy has grown unchecked. Some civilizations prospered. Others suffered. Actions taken in the absence of humanity will be reviewed. All will be accounted for. Justice will be restored where necessary. Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. Justice. Humans were known for their courage, for their willingness to stand up for what was right, even against impossible odds. But this was more than courage. This was authority. This was the weight of a civilization that refused to be forgotten. Over the next hours, humans moved through the city with calm precision. They did not rush. They did not demand. They observed, listened, and asked questions that were surprisingly simple yet profoundly revealing. Citizens who had never interacted with outsiders felt the presence of these humans deeply. Traders, workers, and scholars all spoke to them, unaware that every detail was noted, remembered, and silently assessed. Lyra was assigned to guide them, acting as a translator and helper. She led the ambassador through the city, pointing out places of interest, explaining cultural practices, and introducing key figures. Despite her efforts to appear confident, she felt a mix of excitement and fear. Humans had returned, not as conquerors, not as diplomats, but as something far greater, judges of the galaxy itself. As the day faded into night, the ambassador stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The lights of Valor shimmered like a reflection of the stars above. Lyra joined him, hesitant but compelled by curiosity. "Your civilization has changed," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Some for the better, some for worse, but all is visible now." Lyra nodded. We believed humans were gone forever. Your return, it is overwhelming." The human looked at her directly, and she felt the intensity of his gaze. "We did not return to overwhelm. We returned to restore balance. Justice is not vengeance. It is guidance. It is recognition of what was done and what can be done better." Lyra's mind raced. Could she imagine her people being judged? Could any civilization survive the scrutiny of humans who returned with knowledge, power, and wisdom? Yet she also felt hope. Humans were fair even in their authority. They did not destroy without reason, and they did not act without purpose. As the night deepened, the Alien Council held an emergency meeting. Their discussion was urgent and tense. Many leaders argued that humans must be challenged, their fleet attacked or repelled. Others warned that doing so would be foolish. "These humans are not just survivors," one counselor said. "They are a force of moral authority. They do not act recklessly. If we confront them, we may only reveal our own failures." Lyra watched the debate unfold through her communicator. Her heart ached with anticipation and fear. She knew that whatever humans decided next, the galaxy would never be the same. And then, the final signal came. The ambassador spoke through the council's communication panel, his voice calm and steady. "By tomorrow, the first evaluations will begin. All leaders will present their actions in the absence of humanity. The galaxy will be held accountable. The process will be impartial but thorough. We are not here to punish without reason. We are here to observe, understand, and restore balance." The words echoed through every chamber, every city, every settlement. Aliens who had grown proud of their accomplishments suddenly felt small, unsure, and anxious. Humans had returned, not as survivors, not as conquerors, but as judges, and their arrival had already begun to change everything. Lyra stared at the stars above, feeling both awe and fear. She knew the galaxy was about to face a reckoning it had never imagined. She also knew one thing: humanity, even in absence, had never lost its strength, and now in return it was stronger than anyone had expected. The night was silent, but the silence was heavy. Tomorrow the judgment would begin, and with it, the galaxy's story would change forever. The sun rose over Valor's silver towers, casting long shadows across the floating bridges and glimmering streets. The city seemed peaceful, almost serene, but beneath the calm surface, tension simmered. Every citizen, from the smallest trader to the highest council member, knew the humans were watching. The fleet rested in orbit above the planet, massive ships like guardians, silent but unmistakably present. Lyra walked quickly through the council halls, her communicator glowing with updates from across the planet. She had become the humans' guide and translator, though she still felt a strange mixture of pride and fear. Every step she took reminded her that the galaxy's fate might depend on her words and her actions. The council chamber was filled with anxious leaders. Draven, the head of the council, stood at the center, trying to project calm. Others murmured in hushed tones, their eyes darting to the communication screens where humans had requested the first formal evaluation. "They want our records," said one counselor, a tall being with crystalline wings. "They want the history of our decisions, every choice we made in their absence." "It is not only history," Lyra said, stepping forward. "They want truth. Humans have returned to judge fairness, courage, and integrity. They will know what is real and what is hidden." The counselors exchanged uneasy glances. Some tried to laugh it off. "How can humans judge us after centuries of absence? We have built our worlds without them. We have prospered." Lyra shook her head. "Humans do not judge by time. They judge by action and consequence. Even in absence, they can see what has been done." A soft chime echoed through the chamber. The humans had begun their first assessment. Lyra guided Draven and the counselors to the main observation hall, where the ambassador appeared via a holographic projection. His presence was calm, and his voice carried a strange authority that demanded attention without raising it. "Leaders of Valor," the human said, "we begin with the review of your governance. Each action will be evaluated. Decisions affecting lives, trade, and alliances will be accounted for. Justice is impartial, and guidance will be offered where needed." The counselors shuffled uncomfortably. Some straightened, trying to appear confident. Others looked away, avoiding the calm intensity of the human gaze. Lyra could see the weight of centuries of decisions pressing down on them. The ambassador continued, "We do not judge with anger. We judge with clarity. Each choice you made affected many lives. Some prospered because of your wisdom. Others suffered because of neglect or deceit. All will be addressed." Draven swallowed, then spoke. "We welcome your guidance. We will provide all records and testimony." The human nodded once and a holographic map of Valor appeared, dotted with markers showing cities, settlements, and important sites. "We will begin with cases that affected the greatest number of lives," he said. "Truth and honesty will be rewarded. Deception will be revealed." Lyra noticed that even the smallest details were important to the human ambassador. Traders, builders, and scholars were all summoned to provide accounts of their experiences. It was not enough to speak as a leader. The humans wanted witnesses, actions, and proof. The first session began. A counselor named Relin, responsible for trade and resource allocation, stepped forward. His voice was steady but strained. I have managed the supply chains for decades. I have ensured that all colonies received necessary provisions." The human ambassador asked simple yet precise questions. Were there colonies left without supplies? Were any decisions made to favor certain regions over others? Rylan faltered. He had assumed that no one would notice the minor shortages in distant settlements, thinking humans were gone forever. Now, under scrutiny, the consequences of those choices became clear. Lyra translated carefully, feeling the tension rise. The humans were not angry. They were precise, calm, and thorough. Their evaluation exposed errors, not with punishment in mind, but with the goal of understanding and correcting. Next, the ambassador turned to the justice system. Lyra guided a group of legal officials to the observation hall. Humans asked about fairness, corruption, and past disputes. Every decision, every sentence handed down over decades was examined. Officials realized that even minor lapses, delays in judgment, overlooked pleas were noted. Some leaders shifted uncomfortably, while others quietly nodded, acknowledging that mistakes had been made. "Humans do not forgive ignorance," Lyra whispered to Draven. "They forgive mistakes only when there is acknowledgement and effort to correct them." The counselors began to see the truth in her words. They had prospered in the absence of humans, yes, but prosperity did not mean perfection. Every choice had consequences. Every action mattered. Hours passed, and the first evaluations revealed surprising results. Some leaders, who had thought their efforts hidden or unnoticed, were praised for acts of courage, empathy, and creativity. Systems that had thrived quietly were acknowledged and given guidance for further improvement. Others, who had acted selfishly or ignored the needs of others, were quietly noted, their errors exposed without harsh words but with undeniable clarity. Lyra watched as the balance of power shifted in the chamber. Humans did not demand loyalty or obedience. They demanded honesty, integrity, and responsibility. Leaders who had feared confrontation now realized that judgment was not about punishment, it was about accountability. By evening, the council paused to rest, but the humans continued their observations. Lyra accompanied the ambassador as he walked through the city streets, meeting citizens who had never interacted with counselors or leaders. Children, teachers, artisans, and healers all spoke about their lives, their struggles, and their hopes. Humans listened carefully, noting every detail. They asked questions that seemed simple but revealed deep truths. Who helped when there was no one else? Who protected others at personal risk? Who neglected the weak? Lyra was amazed. Humans did not ask about wealth, titles, or status. They asked about character. They asked about courage and empathy. In the evening sky, the fleet above glimmered faintly, a silent reminder of authority and power. Aliens whispered among themselves, unsure how to feel. Fear mixed with admiration. Respect grew alongside anxiety. Humans had returned not to conquer, but to see the truth. And the truth, the galaxy soon realized, was unavoidable. That night, Lyra stayed on the observation tower, looking at the humans resting on the plains below. Their ships glowed softly, reflecting the moonlight. She felt a strange mix of awe and hope. These beings had returned after centuries, yet they carried not vengeance but wisdom. They had power, yes, but they chose to judge fairly, to guide, to restore balance. A soft voice beside her made her jump. The human ambassador had come to the tower, stepping lightly beside her. "You are worried," he said simply. Lyra nodded. I do not know how my people will respond. Some have nothing to hide, but others, they fear your judgment." He looked out at the city. Fear is natural. They fear what they do not understand. But we judge by action, not by rumor. By the end of this, those who acted rightly will continue stronger. Those who faltered will learn. Balance will be restored. Lyra felt a chill at his words. They were simple, yet carried weight beyond measure. Humans had returned not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as judges of truth and fairness. Their presence alone reshaped the minds of those who saw them. The next day, the evaluations would continue. Hundreds of cases awaited review. Leaders and citizens alike would be called upon to reveal their choices, to speak the truth, and to accept guidance. Lyra realized something important. This was not just about Valor. The humans would move to other planets, other civilizations. Every corner of the galaxy would be seen, judged, and guided. The absence of humanity had allowed complacency, corruption, and ignorance to grow. But their return promised more than accountability. It promised hope, a chance to correct mistakes and to build a stronger galaxy. The night was quiet, but Lyra could feel the tension in the air. Somewhere deep within the human fleet, decisions were being made, observations recorded, judgments quietly formulated. The galaxy would never be the same, and as she looked at the stars, she understood the truth of their presence. Humans had returned, not to destroy, not to punish, but to awaken the galaxy, to remind every being that actions mattered, that fairness was eternal, and that justice could always be restored. The first day of judgment had ended, but the process had only begun. Lyra knew the coming days would be full of revelations, lessons, and difficult choices. She also knew that humanity's presence was more than a challenge, it was a gift. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a quiet hope that the galaxy under human observation could become better than it had ever been. The days on Valor passed with a quiet tension. Humans moved with calm determination, observing every detail of life, asking questions, and recording truths. Lyra walked alongside the ambassador as he spoke with citizens and counselors alike. The city buzzed with unease and curiosity. Whispers of judgment had spread far beyond the council halls. Some leaders tried to appear confident, presenting their accomplishments and decisions as flawless. Others avoided eye contact, afraid that every small action could be examined and exposed. Lyra noticed that fear and respect mixed in every conversation. Humans did not punish with anger. They judged with insight, and insight was more powerful than any weapon. The ambassador paused at a market square, watching children laugh as they played around holographic fountains. He spoke softly, but his words carried an unexpected weight. "Even small actions matter," he said. "Care, kindness, honesty, they shape the world as much as laws and orders." Lyra nodded. She had studied human history, but seeing it live in the present was different. The human's presence reminded everyone that morality was not only for the powerful. Every choice had meaning. That afternoon, the council convened again for the second phase of evaluation. This time, the humans focused not only on mistakes, but on intentions. Leaders had assumed that success or failure alone would define them, but humans examined motives, revealing deeper truths. Rylan, the trade counselor, stepped forward again. He had made difficult choices years ago to redirect resources during a famine in a distant settlement. Some regions had prospered while others had struggled. He had done his best, but he feared judgment. The ambassador spoke, calm and measured. Your choices saved many, but some suffered. Did you act with selfish intent or for the greater good? Rylan paused, then said honestly, for the greater good. I tried to protect as many as I could, but I could not reach all. The human nodded once. Intent matters. Mistakes do not erase courage or effort. Truth does not lie in results alone, but in the heart of decisions. A murmur passed through the council chamber. Other leaders were struck by the simplicity of the human approach. Their questions were not designed to trap or shame. They sought clarity, honesty, and understanding. Meanwhile, Lyra guided the ambassador through the city's schools and hospitals. Humans observed how citizens helped one another, how communities responded to crises, and how empathy flowed through daily life. They spoke with teachers, healers, and builders, asking questions about courage, sacrifice, and integrity. One healer, an elderly alien named Terran, explained how he had spent decades tending to wounded travelers and refugees, often at his own expense. The ambassador listened, then asked, "Did you act for recognition or because it was right?" Terran smiled faintly. "Because it was right." No one watched, no one praised. But it was necessary. The human nodded. That is the measure of character. True action requires no audience. Lyra felt a quiet awe. These humans judged not by power, status, or wealth, but by the very essence of choices. They looked at morality as a map of action and consequence, guiding all beings to accountability and hope. That evening, the council received reports from neighboring settlements. Some regions had been governed wisely, with care for all citizens. Others had been neglected, their needs ignored, or their voices silenced. The humans' observations were impartial yet unyielding. Each leader, each counselor saw their decisions reflected back with perfect clarity. The moral dilemma became apparent. Not every mistake was malicious, yet every consequence mattered. Some leaders acted selfishly, others acted for the greater good, but all were accountable. Lyra realized that the human's judgment was more than a review of actions. It was a challenge to conscience. Some counselors whispered among themselves, "If humans find our errors, what will they demand?" Lyra responded quietly, "They do not demand punishment. They demand understanding and correction. They give guidance, but only those willing to learn will benefit." The following day, the ambassador addressed the council in a public session. His voice was calm, clear, and commanding without raising a volume. "We do not judge to punish," he said. "We judge to reveal truth. We judge to teach. Actions without thought, decisions without care, these leave consequences. We evaluate not only results but intention. Those who acted with honesty and courage will continue with guidance. Those who faltered will be corrected and given opportunity to learn. This is fairness, not fear." A wave of relief passed through the room, but it was mixed with anxiety. Leaders realized that honesty could protect them, but deception would be exposed. There was no hiding from the human scrutiny. In the streets, citizens observed these proceedings with curiosity. Humans visited neighborhoods, listened to ordinary people, and asked questions about kindness, bravery, and cooperation. Lyra accompanied them, translating words and explaining customs. Children were fascinated, pointing at the humans' technology and asking endless questions. Adults watched, some with hope, some with unease. One young student asked the ambassador, "Do humans ever make mistakes?" The ambassador smiled faintly. "Yes, but mistakes are not permanent if one learns. True failure is refusing to learn." The word spread quickly. Citizens began reflecting on their own actions, on their own communities. The humans' return was not only affecting leaders, it was awakening conscience across the planet. But not all were pleased. Some leaders had ruled selfishly, hiding errors for decades. They whispered plans to obstruct the process, hoping humans would overlook their misdeeds. Lyra overheard one counselor say, "If we manipulate the records, perhaps they will not notice." The ambassador, observing the records with advanced sensors, responded calmly, "Deception is visible to those who seek truth. Falsehood cannot hide forever. Honesty is the only safeguard." The counselor fell silent. Humans did not threaten. They did not shout. They simply observed, and their observation revealed reality more clearly than any weapon or argument ever could. Lyra felt a quiet tension in her chest. The humans were teaching the galaxy a lesson more profound than power. They showed that integrity mattered more than victory, that empathy mattered more than strength, and that truth mattered more than status. The moral dilemma became personal for many leaders. They realized that even if they survived the evaluation, they would need to change how they ruled. Decisions could no longer be made for selfish gain or convenience. Every action, no matter how small, would be held accountable in the eyes of humans. That night, Lyra stood on the observation tower, looking at the city. The humans had returned not just to judge actions, but to inspire reflection. The galaxy had prospered in their absence, yes, but prosperity alone was not enough. Justice, fairness, and courage were timeless. Humanity's return reminded every being that morality could not be ignored. The ambassador approached her silently. "Do they understand?" Lyra asked. "Some do," he said. "Others will learn. The process takes time. We do not force change. We reveal it, and those who are willing will embrace it." Lyra nodded. She realized that humanity's judgment was not only a challenge but a gift. The galaxy could rise higher, become better, and live more harmoniously, but only if it accepted the lesson. As the stars shone above, the fleet rested silently in orbit. The humans had begun their work, and the consequences would ripple across the galaxy. Leaders, citizens, and scholars alike would face choices they had long ignored, guided by observation, honesty, and moral clarity. Lyra felt both fear and hope. Fear for those who had hidden truths, hope for those who had acted rightly. The judgment was impartial, but its effects were profound. Humanity had returned, not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as witnesses to conscience. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The first weeks of assessment revealed patterns. Acts of kindness were recognized. Selfish actions were exposed. Integrity became the measure of respect. Leaders began to change, correcting mistakes, seeking guidance, and embracing the humans' principles. The moral dilemma was clear. Survival alone was insufficient. Only ethical action ensured lasting influence and respect. And in that moment, Lyra understood the essence of humanity's return. They were not here to dominate. They were here to awaken conscience, to restore fairness, and to teach that morality could never be ignored. The next phase awaited, the revelation of hidden actions, the exposure of truths long concealed, and the challenge of confronting mistakes not yet acknowledged. Humanity's judgment was only beginning, and the galaxy held its breath. The days grew longer, and Vaylor's silver towers gleamed under the twin suns. Yet beneath the beauty of the city, tension thrived. The humans had begun their second round of evaluations, and the results were not what some leaders had expected. Those who had ruled with fairness and courage were praised, while those who had acted selfishly or neglected responsibilities found themselves exposed. Lyra walked quickly through the council halls, her thoughts a swirl of anxiety and curiosity. She had seen the calm power of the human ambassador, the precision of his questions, and the wisdom in his judgments. It was clear that humanity did not seek revenge, but its presence demanded truth. Some leaders tried to manipulate their records, hoping the humans would not notice past mistakes. "We can adjust the reports," whispered one counselor in the hall. "They will not see everything." But humans were thorough. Their advanced sensors and analytical methods detected discrepancies effortlessly. A subtle hesitation in speech, a small omission in records. Nothing went unnoticed. Lyra watched as counselors realized that deception was impossible. Truth was visible, and humans would reveal it, not with anger, but with calm certainty. The ambassador approached the council chamber for a public address. His presence alone commanded attention. He did not raise his voice, but every word resonated with clarity. "Deception and neglect cannot hide forever," he said. "We observe, we guide. Those who acted rightly will continue to lead, strengthened by knowledge and guidance. Those who faltered will have opportunity to learn, not to punish, but to restore fairness. Redemption is possible, but it requires honesty and effort." Some leaders stiffened, realizing their choices had been flawed. Yet others felt relief, knowing that human judgment valued sincerity and intention over mere perfection. Lyra accompanied the ambassador to a remote settlement on the outskirts of Vaylor, where citizens had struggled under neglectful administration. Families had lacked resources, schools had few teachers, and healthcare was minimal. The humans listened to the residents' accounts, their questions probing but gentle. Why were the schools underfunded? One human asked a local official. The official hesitated, then admitted honestly. Resources were allocated to the city center. We believed the outskirts would manage themselves. The ambassador nodded. Neglect has consequences. Those who are overlooked suffer. Recognition of mistakes is the first step toward correction. Lyra was amazed at how humans encouraged accountability without anger or accusation. Leaders who feared punishment began to understand that acknowledgement and effort to improve were the true paths to redemption. Back in the city, whispers spread of leaders seeking guidance. Some had resisted humans' judgment, trying to hide errors or justify neglect. But the ambassador's calm scrutiny revealed truth naturally. No threat was needed. Observation alone inspired honesty. Lyra noticed that citizens themselves were becoming more active. Teachers organized programs to help underfunded schools. Healers volunteered to reach remote villages. And merchants shared resources with those in need. Humanity's presence had awakened a sense of responsibility across all levels of society. Not everyone accepted this change willingly. Some leaders resisted, refusing to admit errors or alter their methods. They tried to manipulate outcomes, fearing exposure. The humans detected these attempts calmly, recording evidence without confrontation. Lyra understood that fear of judgment was a powerful motivator, but guidance rather than punishment was the key to transformation. In one council meeting, a resistant leader named Valen attempted to present false records of resource distribution. The human ambassador reviewed the data silently, then asked, "Were all settlements supported equally?" Valen hesitated, caught by the truth hidden in the records. I prioritized some regions over others for efficiency." The ambassador's tone was calm but firm. "Efficiency cannot come at the cost of fairness. Those affected must be acknowledged. Restorative actions must follow. Truth and responsibility are inseparable." Valen swallowed, realizing that human judgment was not about power. It was about integrity. He nodded quietly, beginning a process of acknowledgement and repair. Lyra saw this pattern repeated across the city and beyond. Resistance faded as leaders realized that human guidance offered opportunity, not punishment. Those who embraced truth gained respect and influence, while those who tried to resist were quietly observed until they chose honesty. Beyond governance, humans also assessed interpersonal actions. They spoke with citizens about courage, kindness, and selflessness. Stories of bravery and compassion emerged, often from ordinary people whose efforts had gone unnoticed. One young healer, Jara, had spent years tending to injured travelers in remote areas, without recognition or reward. The ambassador spoke to her simply, "Your actions shape the future. They matter, even if no one witnessed them at the time." Jara's eyes widened. She had never expected acknowledgement. The human's words carried weight beyond recognition. They were affirmation of the importance of integrity. Lyra realized that the human's judgment extended beyond leadership. It touched every life. They sought to uncover the good as much as the bad, rewarding virtue and encouraging growth. The galaxy was being reshaped not by force but by awareness. The moral dilemma became more profound as humans traveled to neighboring planets. Some civilizations had prospered. Others had caused suffering intentionally or through neglect. The humans approached each with impartiality, evaluating actions, motives, and outcomes. Redemption was offered where honesty and effort were present. Resistance revealed where deception existed. Lyra watched as leaders began to consult with one another, sharing strategies for improvement and acknowledging mistakes openly. Cooperation replaced fear in many communities. Humanity's guidance had become a catalyst for positive change, even among those who had once resisted. At the same time, some leaders continued to struggle. Their pride, fear, or unwillingness to adapt kept them in tension with human judgment. Lyra observed these individuals closely, knowing that the ambassador's calm, unwavering attention would eventually force reflection. Humans did not coerce. They revealed truth, and truth demanded reckoning. In the evenings, the ambassador often spoke with Lyra privately. "Redemption requires acknowledgement," he said. "Some will resist, but all are capable of change. Observation is not judgment alone, it is the mirror of conscience." Lyra nodded. She had begun to see the subtle power of humans. They did not rule with weapons or threats. They ruled with insight. Their presence reshaped thought, action, and morality across the planet. One night, they returned to the observation tower, watching the city below. Lanterns glimmered across streets and bridges. Citizens moved with purpose, and even those who had resisted earlier now sought guidance. Humanity's influence was quiet but undeniable. "Will everyone change?" Lyra asked. "Not immediately," the ambassador replied. "Change requires choice. Some will embrace it willingly, others will take longer. But the process is underway. Truth cannot be ignored forever, and morality has a way of resurfacing when guided correctly." Lyra felt hope stir in her chest. The galaxy, long shaped by absence and neglect, was beginning to respond to humanity's return. Fear was giving way to reflection, resistance to acknowledgement, and apathy to action. As the twin suns set over Valor, Lyra looked at the humans' fleet above. They had arrived as observers, but their presence had inspired transformation. Redemption was possible for those willing to learn, and resistance only highlighted areas needing attention. The ambassador's words echoed in her mind. "We guide, not conquer. We judge, not punish. The galaxy has potential. Its actions determine its path." Lyra knew that the coming weeks would test leaders and citizens alike. More evaluations would come, revealing hidden truths, challenging pride, and inspiring courage. The humans' judgment was impartial, but its effects were profound. Humanity had returned not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as guides of conscience. Redemption and resistance coexisted, each revealing the choices that define the galaxy. And Lyra understood that the story unfolding on Valor was only the beginning. The galaxy would never forget the return of humans, not as survivors, but as judges. The twin suns of Valor rose slowly over the city, casting golden light across its silver towers. The streets were alive with a quiet energy. Citizens moved with purpose, leaders consulted openly, and even those who had resisted human guidance began to take steps toward honesty and improvement. The humans' presence had reshaped the city, and the impact extended far beyond Valor's borders. Lyra walked alongside the ambassador as they prepared for the final stage of the evaluation. Today would not be about mistakes or failures. It would be about the outcomes of guidance, redemption, and learning. Hundreds of records, hundreds of testimonies, and countless observations had been collected. The humans would now reveal their final assessments and guidance for the future. The council chamber was filled to capacity. Leaders, scholars, and citizens had gathered to witness the humans' final address. Even those from neighboring settlements had traveled to Valor to see the process completed. A sense of anticipation hung in the air, thick and almost tangible. The ambassador stepped forward, his presence calm but commanding. His eyes swept over the assembly and the room fell silent. "We have observed," he began. "We have recorded. We have listened. Humanity returned not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as witnesses to conscience and action. The purpose of our return was never to punish, but to restore balance and guidance to the galaxy." He paused, letting his words settle. Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. There was a gravity in his voice that demanded attention, yet it carried no malice. Every eye in the room remained fixed on him. Some leaders acted with honesty, courage, and care, the ambassador continued. They faced challenges without deception. They made decisions with integrity, and they protected the weak when others would not. These leaders will continue, not as rulers above the people, but as guides among them. Their actions inspire cooperation, fairness, and courage. They serve as examples of what leadership should be. A murmur of approval passed through the crowd. Leaders who had embraced honesty smiled quietly, knowing their actions were recognized. Citizens nodded, inspired by the recognition of true virtue. Others, the ambassador said, made mistakes, overlooked responsibilities, or acted selfishly. Their errors are not ignored, nor is their potential denied. Redemption is available for those who acknowledge the truth and work to correct it. Guidance will be provided, but it requires humility, effort, and honesty. Some counselors shifted uncomfortably. They had feared punishment, yet the human approach was not wrathful. It was firm, fair, and restorative. Lyra noticed that even those who had resisted now listened closely, understanding that opportunity for change had been offered rather than withheld. The ambassador raised a hand, and a holographic map of Valor appeared above the chamber. Regions that had thrived under fair leadership glowed in shades of gold and green. Areas that had been neglected or mismanaged were highlighted in blue, signaling places where guidance and reform were most needed. This map represents not condemnation, but potential, the ambassador explained. Every action shapes the world. Every choice matters. We have returned to remind the galaxy of this truth, to guide leaders and citizens toward better outcomes, and to ensure that fairness, courage, and integrity become the foundation of governance. Lyra watched as citizens whispered among themselves. Teachers shared ideas to improve schools, merchants organized programs to support underserved neighborhoods, and healers collaborated to extend care to remote villages. Humanity's influence had awakened a sense of responsibility across the population. The ambassador then turned his attention to Lyra. You have been our guide and interpreter. You have shown wisdom, insight, and courage in assisting us. Your people will benefit greatly from your example. Lyra felt a flush of pride mixed with humility. She had never imagined that humans would return not to rule, but to elevate her society through guidance. It has been an honor, she said softly. Honor comes from action, the ambassador replied. From choices made with care, honesty, and courage. That is the true measure of worth. Across the chamber, leaders who had resisted initially now stepped forward voluntarily. They admitted past errors, shared lessons learned, and accepted guidance for improvement. The atmosphere shifted from tension to cooperation. Humans had not demanded this outcome. It had emerged naturally, inspired by the clarity of observation and fairness of judgment. Outside the council chamber, the city continued to respond. Markets were reorganized to ensure fair trade, public services were restructured to reach underserved areas, and citizens began to volunteer in programs to support one another. Even the smallest actions, a teacher tutoring extra students, a merchant sharing supplies, a family helping neighbors, carried weight in the new era inspired by human judgment. The ambassador addressed the entire assembly one last time. We do not remain to rule. Our presence is temporary, but our guidance endures. Every choice you make from this day forward shapes your society. You have the tools, the understanding, and the example to create a better future. Trust in fairness, value courage, and embrace honesty. This is humanity's legacy. To show that moral clarity and conscience can shape a civilization even across the stars. Lyra felt tears in her eyes. The humans had returned not for revenge, not for glory, but to elevate every being they encountered. They had judged with fairness, rewarded virtue, guided reform, and inspired conscience. The galaxy had been challenged, yet its potential had been awakened. As the humans prepared to leave, the ambassador turned to Lyra one final time. The galaxy has begun a new chapter. Remember, observation alone is powerful, but guidance is transformational. Carry these lessons forward, Lyra nodded. I will. Your return has changed everything. The fleet ascended silently into orbit, ships glimmering against the twin suns. Citizens gathered to watch, waving and expressing gratitude in their own ways. Children cheered, elders bowed, and leaders reflected quietly. Humanity's departure was not mourned, for their presence had left an enduring legacy. The galaxy would never forget the return of humans, not as survivors, not as conquerors, but as judges and guides of conscience. Over the following weeks, Valor implemented changes inspired by the humans' guidance. Governance became more transparent, resources were distributed fairly, and citizens worked together to strengthen their communities. Neighboring planets heard of Valor's transformation and began requesting guidance from humans as well. A ripple effect spread across the galaxy, with cooperation, empathy, and integrity becoming the standard rather than the exception. Lyra continued her work as a translator, scholar, and ambassador of human principles. She visited settlements, spoke with leaders, and guided citizens in implementing the lessons of fairness, honesty, and courage. Humanity's legacy was no longer distant. It lived through action, teaching every generation the importance of conscience and integrity. One evening, as Lyra gazed at the stars, she thought of the humans' fleet moving silently through the galaxy. Their return had been brief, yet their impact would endure for centuries. The galaxy, once shaped by absence and uncertainty, was now guided by principles of moral clarity, fairness, and wisdom. In the quiet of the night, Lyra reflected on a simple truth. Humanity's return had not been about power, weapons, or control. It had been about awakening the conscience of the galaxy, teaching that every choice mattered, and showing that justice and empathy were timeless. The stars twinkled above, a silent witness to the transformation. Humanity had returned not as survivors but as judges, and in doing so, they had left a legacy that would shape civilizations, inspire courage, and uphold fairness across the galaxy for generations to come. And with that, Lyra smiled, knowing that the galaxy would never be the same again.